Good morning. It's been a great last week, and I'm glad to have us together for a few minutes again this morning. Um, last Thursday, of course, 4th of July, and we had a very low-key picnic at church. Had I don't know, a 14-foot or bigger 16-foot water slide. And I was going to say for the kids, but by the end of the day, some adults were going down it. And just an enjoyable time, a lot of good food, and playing some together, and just love being around our church family. And it was a good. Of course, we're just a week away from Vacation Bible School ending, and it just was a very much a enjoyable week. And I'm so thankful for our country, and hope you stay in prayer for your nation. Just take time every day, pray that God gives us who we should have. And I don't know, I'm sure no prophet in those kind of things. I just know we need God, and we need Him in a big way. And just thinking about the, often you'll hear me read some stories of great hymns, where the hymns came from. Sometimes stories of people in history who had adversity, and they kept going. They didn't quit. Great stories of in Baptist history of people who just said, "I'm going to believe my Bible." And of course, everybody says they're going to believe their Bible, but when they get right down to it, not nearly as many do believe it as would like to say they believe it. But there's a lot of great people, and you know that in Timothy, Paul talks about Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world. In 2 Timothy 4:10, he says to Timothy in verse 9, "Do thy diligence to come shortly unto me." Paul said, "Timothy, I'd sure like you to be here." He's writing from jail, and he said his Demas, one of his associates, had left. Just, it says the only explanation is having loved this present world. And of course, you can look at that however you want. You could say he's a horrible worldly person that wanted money more than Christ or whatever. Or you could just say we're living with Paul was scary. Never knew when you're going to be thrown in a lion's den, shipwrecked, beaten, hung over a wall in a basket or whatever. And Paul lived a life on the edge, to say the least. And maybe he just went home because he wanted family and friends, and he wanted to see his wife and children. Who knows? There's no telling. But it wasn't good circumstances. And Paul said, "Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world." Then he mentions Cretans. He also left to go to Galatia. Titus, who the very next book of the Bible is written to, he left to Dalmatia. "Only Luke is with me. Take Mark and bring him with thee, for he is profitable to me for the ministry." And he mentions some other people there at the end of 2 Timothy chapter 4. I don't want to take just a couple of minutes, and I heard a sermon recently on this subject, and I thought I'd address it just a little from my own heart on the subject of dependable. Dependable. And it's not really a Bible term, but it's sure a Bible characteristic. Somebody who you can depend on. And of course, we can depend on God. We know that. And we can trust Him, and we can lean on Him. But you go back to the story of Ittai the Gittite, when David was headed out of Jerusalem. His own son, Absalom, had overthrown the kingdom, and David wasn't going to go to war against his son. He just wasn't going to do it. And so David, he's slipping out of town, and this guy Ittai had just recently come to Jerusalem. He's Ittai the Gittite, and so a nearby country, but he wasn't a Jew. He wasn't an Israelite, and he didn't have to have any allegiance, yet he did. And he's leaving town with David and with his loyal men. And David said, go back to town. You're fine. You've only recently come, and you're a stranger." And Ittai said, "I'll go up and down with the king." Or David said, "Why should you go up and down with the king?" And Ittai responded, "Well, I will, and I'll go with you, and I'll die where you die." And Ittai, though he was not a Jew, that was a man you could depend on. That was a dependable man. Now here in this story, you see Demas, he wasn't dependable. He left. But then John Mark, you read about him, well, back about Acts, I'm going to say Acts 17, somewhere in there. maybe earlier. John Mark was on that first missionary journey with Paul, and they got just a couple of cities into their missionary journey, and John Mark got on a boat and went back home. And then the second missionary journey, Paul and Barnabas traveled around, went city to city, and they started churches. Well, they come back to Antioch, and from Antioch, they're going to go and visit those churches and see how they're doing, and help them with doctrine and help them get things established a little better. And Barnabas said, well, let's get Mark and bring him along. And well, that was his nephew. And Paul, he had no allegiance to Mark. And Paul said, no, we're not taking a quitter with us. The guy, I could not depend on him. I can't have people around that I can't depend on. And so Barnabas and Paul got in a fuss over him. Barnabas was the one who believed in people. You know, when Paul was off on his own, he'd gotten saved, but the people in Jerusalem didn't trust him. Barnabas is the one who went and got him and introduced him to the body of believers and said, he's okay. This guy's truly saved. And so Barnabas certainly was going to do it for his own nephew. But Barnabas and John Mark went one way, and then Paul, he went the other direction. Took Silas with him, went the other direction, and he had other people with him. Obviously, from this verse, he had Luke, and he had Demas, and he had Crescens and Titus and Tychicus. He said in verse 12, Tychicus have I sent to Ephesus, and then he talks more about the circumstances of his journeys. But the Timothy's pastoring here in Ephesus, and Paul's writing to encourage him. Timothy's going through some battles. And this morning, I just want to take a minute or two and talk about this thing of dependable. Dependable. You married people, your spouse is depending on you. You need to be there and do your job. And every couple's different, what their expectations are. But your spouse should be able to depend on you. Parents, your children should be able to depend on you. Children should be able to be depended upon. I know my son; he will do his job, and you know, over the years, someone many years ago, they had a pistol, an old pistol, and I looked at that and thought, I don't think I would shoot that or carry it or trust my life to it. It looked too old and it was undependable. And if you're going to have a firearm, it ought to be dependable. You ought to know it's going to act right. And a car. Many of you, perhaps, like me, when my wife and I were first married, that car was not dependable. In fact, one time, the job I had for a while in college, I took in-home photography and mainly baby pictures, sometimes families, but mainly baby. And so I'd go to a home, I'd set up a backdrop, put my tripod, my camera up, and I had some stackables and a blanket or two, and a flash, a big flash and a tripod. And I carried it all. One just carried it in, set it up, and I could be into a house, take baby pictures, take it all down, load it up, and get out of the house in 30 minutes. And so our people set appointments would have an appointment every 30 minutes. They'd have me in the same neighborhood, basically. And so I'd go house to house taking pictures, and wanted to get canceled. They'd give me a little extra time, and then some other times it would be a little far, and I'd be running behind. But basically, I ran 30 minutes a home, knowing that most nights at least one canceled. You know, baby's crying or whatever happened. But my car, at one point, the starter went out, and the car ran fine at that point. Well, not good, but it ran. And the key would come out of the ignition. And I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. I've got to work. I can't not go to work. So I got it started and drove to my first appointment, took the key out of the ignition, locked the doors, went in, took the pictures, got in, and turned the key on so the steering wheel would turn. But it idled all day long. It idled. And I just take the key out, and I didn't have to restart the car. And however many hours I worked, evenings, I worked normally like 3 to 8 or something, 3 to 9. And I took pictures, and the car was not dependable. And then, of course, in the wintertime, it didn't have a heater that worked. The blower wouldn't work. If you put your hands right at the floor where it came out, there'd be a little bit of warm. and my camera would get so cold in the car, I'd bring it into a house and it would fog up the inside of the lens. And then I'd have to borrow a blow dryer and heat up my camera, and it was crazy. But I had to find a way to pay the bills and get my wife and I through college. But so I'd take the camera, even though the car wouldn't warm up. I found if I put the camera right at that heating vent, right where the differential bump was, that there'd be enough heat drifting out and keep the camera warm enough that it wouldn't fog up when I went into the house. It took a while to figure that out. But, being dependable is such an important thing. To know that someone's going to be where they said they'd be. Hey, you've all probably had a doctor's appointment or a dentist appointment where you had an appointment and you went there knowing I'm going to bring a book because my 2 o'clock appointment, I have no idea when it will be. And they're not dependable. The importance, Proverbs says that an unfaithful, it's similar to the word dependable, confidence in an unfaithful man in a time of trouble is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint. Again, Proverbs says, who can find a faithful man, a dependable man? I'll tell you, one of the things to me that's so important is a faithful friend, because you're never going to find a friend like Jesus who always will love you and always be there. Now, I want to be that kind of a friend to people. I don't believe that I've ever had a friend that if they called me today, that I wouldn't try to find a way to help them if they had a need. And I don't know, there may be an exception. I can't think of one. I don't want anybody to wonder where my heart is. I don't want anybody to ever wonder about my love for them or my loyalty to them or whatever terminology you want to use. I want people to be able to depend on me being there for them. And I think it's one of the reasons I've never had a lot of money, because I don't know, I'd probably mess up people by giving my money to them and giving them money that God doesn't want them to have or something. Money ruins so many people. But it's not ruined my wife and I. We're just 42 years of marriage, and we're still trying to figure out how to pay the bills every year. But God's been so good to us. I'm not complaining, but to be dependable. I want to challenge you. Be dependable. Be dependable. Can the nursery worker at church know? I know them. They're going to be in nursery. The choir director. Are you dependable? Will you be in choir? Will you be in the orchestra? Will you be in your Sunday school class? Does the superintendent have to wonder whether you're going to make it? Are you going to be in church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night? Are you someone people can depend upon? Are you going to be in church 1 week and not for the next 2, and then in church for 3 weeks and out for 1? It's a sad thing, but when you become not dependable as a church member and you're gone, to me, I don't dislike anybody. Well, we are busy people and all, but I don't follow up and check on people. There are people, if they're not at church on Sunday, I'll send them a text or call them. Hey, you guys okay? Do you need anything? Can I do anything for you? Because they are there. Or if they're going to be on vacation, they might shoot me a text. Hey, going to be out of town. I just got a text from somebody the other day, said, just want you to know I'll be out of town for the next 2 Sundays. We're on vacation. Well, they're dependable. They knew I would be wondering where they are. And so before they even left, they let me know. But when someone is in and out, if they're not there, I don't miss them. Although sometimes if I notice, I may send them a text anyway. Hey, missed you Sunday. Hope you're doing okay. Yeah, we're at the other church, or we're with our friends or whatever, and that's fine. I'm nobody's Lord. I can't tell anybody what to do. But I'll tell you what, there's something to be said for being dependable. I wonder, can God depend on you? Can God speak to your heart and say, hey, give that person a gospel tract? Can he depend on you having a tract? Can he depend on you giving that tract? Can God depend on you helping financially somebody in need? I don't know. Are you dependable? And boy, this thing, like a car motor that just, there was a day most of us have had cars. We hope the car would start, and we go, oh, praise the Lord. Well, I don't say that now with my car, because my truck and my wife's car, they're so nice. I would be shocked if they didn't start. But there was a day when it was a little shocking when the car started right away. And I don't want to be that kind of a Christian. I've not been all I should be as a husband, but I want my wife to know she can depend on me. I will do the best I know how. And I'm going to be faithful to our marriage vows. I'm going to be clean morally and otherwise. I want her to depend. If I'm not going to be around, I'll call her and let her know. If anything unusual is going on in the schedule, and I run a pretty normal schedule, so she knows pretty much what I'm doing on a 7-day period. But I want my wife to know she can depend on me. And oh, I hope that we will be dependable. I hope our church can depend on us. Your tithes, your offerings. Um, I hope our ministry leaders can depend on us, and I hope God can depend on us. And this story, I wouldn't want to be remembered throughout eternity in the scriptures as Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world. And there's a lot of people who don't love me that I still love. And I'm going to keep love never fails. 1 Corinthians 13 tells us, or charity uses it there. Charity never fails. And I don't feel like those people have failed me because they don't have to love me for me to love them. And I can love them. And if someone that I knew didn't like me called me today, if we were ever friends, we're friends still in my heart. And if they called saying, "Preacher, I need help. Could you do this or help out here?" If I felt at all like it was something God would have me do, I would do it because I want people to depend on me. And I certainly am weak in dozens of ways, but I don't want to be weak and dependable. I want God and my church, I want my children to know they can depend on Dad. They can depend on me. And I hope we'll all be that kind of Christian. And I hope you have a great week.